Welcome back to Nano Productions. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to create a website just like the professionals do it. Now, you will find yourself needing to be tempted to memorize the code, but in reality, most programmers don't memorize the code at all. They usually follow documentation, and anytime they want to remember something, they just copy it from their other files. So don't feel tempted to memorize everything. To get started, you want to go ahead and open your web browser because we're going to install the required software. But before we do so, I want to go ahead and talk to you about HTML, which is the first language you're going to have to learn in order to create a website. So, HTML is not a programming language. Instead, it's a markup language. So basically, a markup language is like the outside template of your website. So to give you a demonstration on how this will work, let's visit a very simple website like for instance this website, Whistle Out. If I were to click on, I want to open the source code. So you can right click on the web page and click on View Page Source. Alright, there we go. This is more legible. So if we scroll down, everything is from here down until about here is HTML. Then we have HTML right here downwards. So this may look a little tempting, but don't worry, this is a very large website, very large scale. It has a lot of JavaScript, a lot of indentation, so there's no need to worry about doing this. And it has some styling in the middle, so it's not like pure HTML, so no need to compare. But every website, so basically every website has to be outputted in HTML because the browser can only read HTML. Now, for this course, you will need a browser and a text editor. So for a browser, I have Google Chrome, but you can choose your own. So for our text editor, we will be using Visual Studio Code. So you can get it from code.visualstudio.com. Now you want to go ahead and download this Visual Studio Code, and then so while you're setting, I have it installed already, but while you're setting it up, it'll ask you an option to add it to like the file context menu, like it'll say like open with code, which is basically this. So if I were to open my file explorer, like here for instance, I can just click on open with code and I'll be able to open it with Visual Studio Code. And on your desktop or anywhere you want to create a file. This is where we're going to store our website. Basically a new folder. And you want to call this folder Web Development Course. So inside of that folder, now today we're going to be creating 3 websites, in which 2 websites are just sandboxes, so they're not going to look very pretty. The first website is going to be called HTML Sandbox. Now you can do the manual way of creating folder, but if you want, you can follow along and download Git Bash from I'll show you where. You can get it from, just search on Google Git Bash, the second link, and just download the Windows version, and then you can get Git Bash. And then, so these are basically Unix commands available on Windows. So this will allow you to do is use like sort of like Linux commands on a Windows system. So I'm going to go ahead and make the font size bigger so you can read it. Alright, so now you want to create a new file inside of this folder. So for the Unix command for creating a new file is touch and then the name of the file, which is index.html, which you want to create, but we do not want to create inside of this folder. We want to create a new folder, which is a directory, in which you will say make dir. So basically make directory. What do you want to call your folder? Well, I want to call it HTML_sandbox. And you'll see it's created here. Now, we want to get inside that folder so we can create our next files. Now, we want to go ahead and cd, so basically go into that folder, in which what we call, but well, let's just say you don't remember what you call this folder and you don't have this open. So you can use a command called ls, and it'll tell you what folders you have. So you can see here I have HTML Sandbox. So now I can basically do cd into HTML_sandbox. Now I'm inside of HTML Sandbox, and you can clearly verify we're right here. So inside of here, I want to talk about index.html. So index.html is the entry point for a website, homepage. So whenever you upload a website to a server, to a service, whatever, it's going to look for index.html to load your web page. So basically your home page. Now, you do not want to call it home.html. The server is not going to know which file to open. It's just going to show a directory list of files and then let the user decide. But we do not want to let the user decide on what file to open, in which we will specify index.html. Now, you can go ahead, now we can do an ls here and see we have index.html. And if I were to open this, you will see index.html. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and right-click inside the folder and click on Open with Code. But if you follow the other method of just using Windows itself, it's simple, just new folder, and just follow along. Now, for the .html extension, now you may not have this available at your first. Just want to go down to View and and check File Name Extensions, which will allow you this. Now, you can either right-click in here in this folder and click on Open with Code, but I'm not going to do that. If you have Git Bash and when you were installing Visual Studio Code and you clicked on Add Visual Studio to Path, then you should be able to do code and then dot for inside this folder, and it'll open Visual Studio Code on its own. Now you'll see that Visual Studio Code that it displays index.html. Now do not be worried by just looking at the format of this text editor. It might be overwhelming for some of you, but don't worry, it's very simple. Now, one extension, basically extension, so let me talk about extensions for a while. So extensions are like add-ins for a text editor which make them more and more powerful. So you can see here I have a couple of extensions, but one extension we will need is called Live Server. Right here. So you want to go ahead and click install and install and automatically, so basically I will show you what a live server does. So you have two options of viewing this. So go ahead and type hello world here to simulate that. And now go ahead and go back to your files, and now you have two options. You can either open this file manually, double clicking. Now the downside to opening like that, so I'm going to split screen for a second. The downside for opening that way is, let's just say I add hello world and I save here. So if I do say Control S for save, I have to come back here and reload, which can be tiring as soon as you get into more. So what Live Server does for us is it allows us to just right click and click on Open with Live Server. So inside of Live Server, you can see it has went ahead and opened it for us. Now, if I were to split screen these, now it'll give me some alerts to let me know about stuff. Now I can just go and do, I can like remove the S and then do Control S in Visual Studio Code. And it should yeah, exactly. So it won't automatically reload right now until we get into talking about the structure of a web page. Then I'll show you the reloading. But basically, if I click Control S inside a code editor, it should automatically reload the browser. So now, if you want to increase the font size, it's inside of File, Preferences, and Settings. And you can control the font size. So I'm going to go in for this purpose of the video, I'm going to do 20. Alright, so now, this should be pretty big. Alright. Now let's go and talk about the structure of a web page. So each web page has a structure, and now, we're creating an HTML file, but there's different types of HTML. And now, we're learning HTML5, which is the latest everyone's using it basically. So every web page is displayed in that, and Google and all browsers support it. Now here's one thing: if you haven't defined like Chrome as your default browser and it opens Live Server in Edge, just go and copy the URL, close out of it, open Chrome, paste it in. Just give it a second, and it should be fine. Now, we want to declare this document as an HTML5 document. So, there's this weird syntax you're going to have to learn. It's angle bracket open, exclamation point, doc type, and HTML. Now, once again, just in case it's doc type, and then HTML. Now, you do not have to do capitalize, as I sometimes become lazy and just do like that. totally dependent on you, but the main point is you're getting the main point of doc type and then HTML. So basically this is declaration of the defines that this is an HTML5 document. So no one can come now and say this is HTML4, HTML3, whichever, like it doesn't matter. Now, we want to create the roots of this web page. So our roots live inside an element called HTML. So now all elements come in pairs. So if I were to do HTML, so I start angle bracket, HTML. So now watch what happens as soon as I put my right angle bracket. Automatically VS Code tries to be helpful and gives us the second pair. So now all elements come in pairs, so it makes sense why I did that. Now if you press enter in between, it creates a space, which is totally fine. The space is totally fine. In which inside we're going to call something called nesting element. So we're going to nest another element inside of this. So now we want to, where will we define the web page title? Because if we go here, you can see Visual Studio Code has its own title, but here we have like 127.0.0.1, port number 5500, index.html. This is not very user friendly. So inside of here, we want to go to head element. So now, the same thing, press enter in between elements, which will give you the space. Inside of head elements, we can define the meta information, the titles, style sheets, everything. So mostly, anything that isn't displayed on the web page is usually going to be in here, and it's like external. So we can go in and create a title element, and now let's call this title Hello World. And if I save, and I reload here, Hello World. Now I can change this to anything and call it HTML. And now if I save here, it automatically reloads here because it has the necessary tags to reload. But now we're just going to stick to the title HTML Sandbox, because this is going to be our sandbox where we play with HTML code, we create elements, all that fun stuff. Don't worry, it's not going to be hard. This is a challenge. So now inside of here, we're going to create a body. So now body is where the elements are visible to the user. So if I do body, now inside of here, you can do, this is everything you type in here, gibberish even, is displayed to the user, alright? But this is very small, but I'm going to teach you tags that will make it very bigger. Now, let me say this once again. HTML is only the markup. So, right now, our web pages are not going to look as beautiful until we get into something called CSS, which is Cascading Style Sheets. Now, do not worry about CSS right now, as I will go over that in this video, don't worry. But you'll eventually get to that. So, I want to go ahead and teach you something. So let's display an element on a web page. So I'm going to do H1. Once again, Visual Studio Code becomes helpful. So let me explain to you what's going on. So we're just going to go ahead and type hello world. And then you have hello world displayed on your browser. Yay! So you just have created your first web page. Now I'm going to tell you what is basically happening here. So here's what you're saying. Hey browser, this is HTML5 document, so this tag, you're telling the browser, this is HTML5. And then now we're calling to the browser again, disturbing the browser again, and being like, hey browser, here's the root of our web page. And then, hey browser, take our meta information and our title. Hey browser, I want this title to be the title of my web page. Now, hey browser, close the header, because I finished my meta. And then, now we're saying, hey browsers, start to open workspace. We're going to start. And then H1. So this is a one heading. So this is the largest heading available in HTML. So you're basically saying to the browser, hey browser, give me a heading 1 by declaring this. So anything inside this H1 is going to look very similar until you get into CSS. But this is one heading. This is one element. You just have successfully created an HTML element that displays on a web page. So now, this isn't very helpful to us just learning H1. So let's just say I want to comment this. So comments are useful to let, if a other developer was to come over and wants to see how much work you have put into your web page, they can come over and then see that, oh, so this means this, that means that, basically. So how will we put this in human form? How will we tell another human that this is a H1 element that says hello world? without them actually opening the code. So that's where comments come in. So we do left angle bracket, exclamation point, double hyphens, and then inside of there you can type anything. So Visual Studio Code has decided to do that. And then, so basically that's the beginning of that comment, and then you can close a comment just like that. And then inside of this you can put a comment. So we can say hello world tag. Now, comments are not displayed to the user. So everything in the comment is going to be displayed here, not here. Anything on comment is only displayed to the developer that's working inside the code editor. So, while this is not useful at the moment, we're just going to start. So now, we want to declare a comment inside Visual Studio Code, the fastest way is to control, and then you want to press control on your keyboard and then /, and it creates an automatic comment. So let's talk about all of our headings. So I'm going to create a comment of headings. So now we could manually type out H1, which takes a lot of time, but I'm going to show you Visual Studio Code shortcut. Just type H1 and then tab. It will create this H1 element for us. So inside of this H1, I want to go, so we're creating like a cheat sheet, sandbox sort of thing, so it's like easy for you to study with. So I'm going to put some text in here, which is going to help you understand H1. So this is a heading with an H1 tag. So you can put almost anything inside the H1. So any word, anything you basically want. But for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to put heading with H1 tag. So like we know this is the H1. Like you do not want to mess this up. So now using our shortcut, we're going to create another element, which is a H2, which is going to be smaller than our H1, but not significantly. So heading with H2 tag. And definitely it is smaller. Now you will see that by default, some of these have like space in between of them. Now we can get rid of that space using CSS, but don't worry, we'll get to that as well. The next element you want to create is a H3. So this is a heading with an H3 tag. Now you can go and I'll go into, so now there's 6 types of headings, so you can go ahead and move on and create your own element until H6. So go and explore. Alright, so now we have created 6 different headings. Now you can see H6 is pretty tiny. I'm pretty sure no one wants to read that on a web page. So for that, that's why CSS exists, so you know how to deal with this mini H6, which in reality I haven't used an H6 in a long time since doing web development. So now I've showed you headings, but it doesn't look very pretty. Like headings, they're like bolded, so you don't want your text like that. So that's why paragraphs exist. So put another comment, and I'm going to say paragraph. So now there's only one tag to remember about paragraph, so yay, we don't have to remember too much. So you want to do P tab. Now inside these P tags, we want to go ahead and type any paragraph one. So we can say this is a paragraph. But that isn't very helpful at all. Now that is helpful indeed, but it isn't very helpful to us to like display like a paragraph. So now there's now let's just say we're prototyping a website, like testing a website to see how it will look and play around. We might not have content. So for that reason, Visual Studio Code has a very handy tag, which is lorem. And then now how many words you want. So we can say even 3,000 words, 3 million, whatever. But I want 30 words of lorem. So you do lorem 30 tab. And just develop 30 words of lorem ipsum, which is dummy text basically. So now, this is how a paragraph look like. Now, Google Chrome might prompt you to translate the page, just because lorem is not pure English. But yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Now, let's talk about links. So now, you go on a web page. Let's on Visual Studio web page again. Now, let's find a link to click on. Well, let's click on our privacy. There's privacy statement. So now it basically takes you to an external page. Now we can accomplish the same thing with our website. So you want to go in and put a comment for links. And then here the links have a, so now they're use a tag with href is where you're pointing to. So where are you pointing to, which is href. and then closing tag. So now, inside of href, that's where you put where you want to go. So I want to go to, let's just say, google.com. So I'm going to be like www.google.com. And then let's type in, so inside the A tags, this is where you're going to type the text that you want it to be displayed. So I'm going to say, click me. Now, as soon as I type in click me, you'll see it up here on here, obviously. So if I click on that, it can't take me to google.com. Now, this is because you gotta define like that. So https://google.com. Now, hopefully, this thing can catch it for us. And still, it can't take us to Google.com. So, what if we remove www? This is weird. It's not allowing me to go to google.com apparently. Alright, but nonetheless, you can. So if I was to go ahead and like do that. There we go. So it takes us to google.com after removing the www. So now we're on Google. Now this is, let's just say you were now this was your website and you told someone to go to google.com. Now, number one, they just have left your website. So you just lost a visitor apparently just because you made them click on that link. So now there's a really easy way to make this open in a new tab. In which is, so now elements have attributes. So attributes define very different things. So we have an attribute which is called target. Now if I type in target, Visual Studio Code will add the equal sign and then the quotation. Basically this href is also attribute for this link. So inside of here, just type in underscore blank. Now there should be something different. If I click on click me, we're in a new tab. So we still have that visitor that came to our website. Alright, so let's review what we have learned. So the first thing that I taught you guys was that every file that is a HTML file must have the extension .html. Now sorry if you can't see this, but it's really small, but .html is right here. It is literally everywhere, reminding you that you need .html. Now, the first tag that we learned when creating a website was the doc type HTML. Now this declares this file as an HTML5 document and not a XHTML file document. So we are writing HTML5 and not any other type. And then, for us to begin the roots of the document, like basically the beginning and the end point of the document, is HTML, the tags HTML. Now we learned also that HTML tags come in pairs, like always. And then the head tag, same thing in pairs, is the like where the title is held, the meta tag, everything. Now here's one topic I haven't talked about, and that is nesting elements. So here you would see that the title tag is actually nested inside the head tag, and so is all this nested inside this stuff is nested inside of the body tag. The body is nested inside the HTML tag. The head tag is also nested inside HTML, and everything is basically one hierarchy. Now, here's one thing I haven't talked about, and that is the indentation. So you want to keep your file neat and clean so it is easy to read. Now, if I were to go ahead, and now indentation is not important for the browser, so what we can literally do is basically rewrite the whole entire thing that we have written so far in a very ugly format. So just watch how ugly it could get. And you will soon to find out that it is impossible to nearly read. And then we had to get out the head, then we had to get into the body tag, and then inside of here we have to put an H1 that says hello world. So now this might be one line, so yeah. But just by looking at this, if I had more of this, so like if I put, let's just say all this in there, but let's just say I was put more elements, you can clearly see that it is becoming hard to read and we won't know where elements end. because as soon as we get into the harder elements, it will become harder to read. So that's why indenting documents is better. So if I was to go ahead and indent this a little bit, maybe not the best indentation, but a lot better. There, a lot more suitable to read. So number one, you do not want to do this. Have 2 doc types in one document, 2 HTMLs and 2 bodies and 2 heads. That will confuse it, but yeah. You can clearly take away that indentation makes the document easier to read, and so does nesting. So every time you nest an element inside an element, just tab it over. It will be so much easier. So now, let's move on to something with organization. So we want to organize our, let's just say we want to create a list. Now, you can create a list with what we have learned just by using paragraphs. So we can say list item. So you can sort of create a list. I mean, not the best list of the world, but hey, it's a list, alright? So, instead, we're going to learn something proper. So let's include our comment for lists. Now we have 2 types of lists in HTML. So we have 2 types. So now you have unordered lists and ordered list. So now, unordered lists have a tag of UL, while ordered lists have a tag of OL. So now, inside of each list, you still use the same tag. So you nest list items inside of a list container, basically. So you're basically creating a container. So let's start with the unordered list, so UL. Now inside of here, we're nesting. So we're going to be nesting list items. So let me go ahead and save so we can get rid of this. But anyway, let's type in LI. So this is list item. So LI stands for list item. So let's comment that up here. LI stands for list item. So inside of each list item, inside of every LI, you can have 1 list item or many as you want, but I would understand why would you want to do that. So inside this LI, let's do list item 1. And you will see they have some pre-formattation. We get this bullet point for free, basically. We almost did nothing except a UL and a LI. Now here, let me teach you one interesting thing. If I were to create an LI without it, it creates it, but it doesn't have that nice indentation of going onto the right. It'll just stay like that. So you can do LIs, basically, which will create a bullet point, but it's better to do inside a UL so it looks more indentated. But once you get into CSS, this won't be a problem. So let's just create a larger list. Now you can get the idea of what I'm talking about. Now, this is the unordered list. How about ordered list? Well, we already mentioned that ordered lists are OL tags. So let's do OL. Inside of here, we can do the same LIs. So we'll do list item 1, list item 2. Now, guess what an ordered list will look like. I haven't told you what an ordered list looks like. So I want you to pause the video and think about it. How would an ordered list look like? Alright, so ordered list, spoiler alert, has numbers. Now, for you guys to not look all the way this down, so now you don't have to copy this, but I'm going to quickly do some funky magic. There. So you guys do not have to copy this, don't worry. But I just did this so you don't have to keep on looking on the bottom. So we have order list. So these have numbers basically. Now basically the purpose of a list is to organize your data. And while this is pretty good organized, let's talk about text formatting, like bolding our words, italics, underline, highlighting, subscript, superscript. Like if you're creating a math equation, you might want to do exponents or subscripts, whatever. So I'm going to create a comment for text formatting. Now some of the most popular tags for text formatting will be, if you want to bold your text, you will want to use the strong tags. And then if you wanted to italic your text, you would use the EM tags. If you wanted to underline your text, you will use the U tags. if you wanted to highlight your text, so highlight, you would use the mark tags. And then if you wanted to add a subscript, so that will be a small number on the bottom, which you'll see in a second, you will see subtags. And then if you wanted to superscript, which is like an exponent, you would do the sup tags. Now let's go and test some of these tags out. So we're going to, now these can be nested inside of a paragraph, and these are inline elements, which I'm going to mention right now. So basically, inline elements are elements that stay on the same line. So for instance, A tags are also inline, but since its parent was a block level element basically means it's going to be on its online, then this moved on the next line. So let me go and show you how that will look like. So if I were to go in and create a paragraph, inside this paragraph, we're going to type this word is going to be, and then inside of here, let's go and create a strong tags for bolding this text. Bold. So this is an inline element. It did not move to its own line, like it did not do this. So it did not move to its own line. Instead, it stayed on the same line, and it took the same amount of width as it needed. So like, this thing did not take up like a whole entire space. So like, if I were to continue typing after the strong tag, this, it took up the space it needed. That's a inline element. While block line element just takes up a whole new line. So that is bold. Now let's go to look at italics. This is italicized. Then let's go and look at, this. Now we're going to look at underlined. So underlined, which is going to be the U tags. Really easy to remember. Now let's going to look at a tag that I haven't talked about, which is a small tag. So basically this like smalls your text up. We will see in a second, but we use the small tags, so really easy to remember. So for that, we'll just do small. Now you can actually use all these extra tags on their own, but so I could do strong, this text is bold. You could do that. You could do, but then these will have like their own type of styling. Like they won't be a paragraph tag. Like you can do this too. This text is italics, and then you could also do this text is underlined. But many times you won't want to do it with an element. And now you can see these are inline elements, so they don't go on their own line automatically. So they just continue after one another, even though they're on separate lines. Now, let's talk about spacing. I could press 100 enters, and then even have a small tag down here, and just say this. And it still comes here. But what happened to all these spaces I have? Like, I worked so hard to create these. Well, apparently, white space does not matter to the browser. Instead, for that reason, we have something called line breaks. Now you will see I did not put an ending tag, so I did not do this. Now that is incorrect format, but this is a self-closing tag. So basically self-closing tags close themselves, like you won't need anything else. So if I were to go ahead and create this break tag, this is a line break, you won't see anything happen. But if I was to go ahead and do like a paragraph with lorem 20, and then like put like couple line breaks under that as well. Now you can do them on the same line, and then we do lorem 10 again. We have all this extra space due to this break. So I could even, to prove it to you, do this, and we still have the extra space. Those are line breaks, so they're auto closing tags. So we can go and talk about line breaks right now beforehand, and say they're self-closing and create and use the BR tag. Alright, now let's go move back. So let's go back to the small tags I was talking about. So let's go back up here to our this sandbox. Now let's go talk about the highlighting example. So this word is going to be, so we do mark tag, highlighted, and then voila, this text is highlighted. Now it's going to do a subscript. So this word is going to be a sub. So we do subscript. And then this is basically a subscript. Let me zoom in more. This is a subscript basically, but what the? Exactly. So a subscript is basically, it goes below the word sorter. And then we have another paragraph tag. This is going to be a superscript, basically like an exponent. Superscript. Exactly, so this is raised, basically. Alright, now we have talked about most of the text formatting. I want to talk about grouping your elements. But while we were talking about line breaks, what if you want a straight line, like to separate your content with? Well, that's why we, HRs exist. So these are basically lines to separate your content. And they use the HR tab. These are also self-closing, so self-closing. So I can go and put an HR between, let's just say here. And then we get a pretty organizational line here. Now, I'll move this. So now we're going to go back and see where we could actually use the line HR. So we can do HR here to separate our content with. So we know what we're talking about. This is all lists. This is all text formatting. So now if we go back, our content looks a lot more organized. So like, it's a lot easier to read instead of the other gibberish. Now here I kind of went on my own, so I might want to do HR. Now, so this is great right now at the moment. So let's move on to grouping our elements. So you want to group your elements. So like, let's just say you had a blog article which we're about to write. So there's an element for this is called a div. So a div is basically does nothing except it groups your elements. So we can do div, and then we can go ahead and group our elements. So we'll go ahead and add a h1, say this is some text. Now we'll write an article later, but we can do like P, then lorem 20. And then you can see here, this text will always be inside this div. So it's a lot easier to see what's going on. Now, how can we like give our groups a name? So think back to elementary school when your teacher divided you guys into groups. Now inside of each group, you guys had to decide a name. Now basically that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to add an attribute to our div. So an attribute to our div. So we're now attributes to a div that give it a name are called classes and IDs. Now you may be thinking, what do these do? Well, they are there for us to identify a group of elements for a single purpose. So basically, for like multiple purposes, sorry. So we will catch on these classes and IDs in CSS more and JavaScript. And by the way, JavaScript is a programming language used with HTML. So let's just create a h1 again. We'll just call it hello, and then a paragraph with lorem 20. What's happening? There. And then let's create another paragraph to simulate this. So we're gonna have two paragraphs. Let's add a HR to divide our content. There. So like you can see, we're like using what we're learning to help us learn more stuff. Now let's add an attribute to this div. So I'm gonna start with a class. Now, a class is basically a name. So let's just give this element and like this whole entire group a name. So we just called it the hello. Alright, so now we can catch on this later with a hello. But let's just create another one of this to simulate ID. And an ID is basically the difference between ID and a div is that an ID in a class is that a class is you can be used multiple times. So let's just say we were saying that this is a article. Let's call this a hello div, right? Just like we did before. But let's just call in the ID we can be more specific. Like this is all about you. Like you don't have to use IDs at all. You can just rely on classes all the time. But we can call this like hello too. This is the second hello. But hello is more but class is more like general. So like you can use this class elsewhere you want. But an ID is unique to itself. It's just like a driver's license. It's unique to you. Like you can't give it to your son and tell them to drive. Now, using what we have learned, we can actually create a blog article. So we can put an HR and we'll call it a blog article. Now, it won't be the prettiest blog article, but hey, it'll be an article. So let's start with a div, and let me teach you a quick shortcut. After a div, if I put a dot, so that's how you identify classes, after that dot, you can actually create the class name. So we can call it article, tab, and then I press enter here to get the spacing. Voila! So our class is article now. So it already gave that identification. Now inside of here, let's put an h3 with some title, and then let's do a small tag. And let's gonna say it's post. And usually you use small tag in the blog for who was it posted by. So let's just say it's posted by Nano. And if I were to scroll down here, we have this extra space in between, but we can get rid of that with CSS, which we're not going to get into right now. And then we create a paragraph tag for the article content and do lorem 20. Why does it not want to work? There. We have just created an article, but let's just say we want to link this to an external page, so we'll use the A. Now, whenever you're testing, like you're building a website, prototyping basically, you can use a hash sign instead of an actual link. So it will still work just like a normal link, except it just won't go anywhere. Except we'll just take it to the top of the page, apparently. Yeah. But it just doesn't go anywhere, so you can have a link without it going anywhere. So this is our mini blog article, HR again, and we have a blog article. Now you see how this line is sort of close to this? Well, with CSS you could fix that, but with HTML, just put a line break. Looks evened out. Now, we talked about lists, which are great ways to organize your content. But let's talk about tables. Now, tables are a great way to organize your content. But the tags for the tables are pretty hard to remember. And then we're also running out of time. So, let me go to create a table tag. Now, this just identifies the table. And then now we want a table head. That is where the content will be bolded, and that will be like the top content of your table. So let's do a T head. Exactly, you're gonna have to remember this. Now let's create a table row. So basically a row is this way, column this way, but you don't create columns you do create columns, but you couldn't create them right now. So to create a table head column, you do TH, and then let's create a fictional table for like a customer list. So ID, and for like, they're like IDs, so like 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's have another table head column for our name, and then for their phone number. This is the end of your table head. Now let's talk about now if I were to save, these columns are bolded. That's the purpose of having TH and table head. Now how about our table body? Well, we can do the same. And then here's one thing I messed up on, sorry. You want to create a table row, so we can copy this, create a table row, and then put it. Now this should look a lot better. And then you can fix the indentation by using Shift Tab to go back. Now inside this table body, we're going to create a table row. Every time you're creating a new row, remember, table row, and then inside, now we're going to change up a bit. So we're going to create a regular table content. So we're going to do TD tag. Inside this TD tag, you can have anything. So we put 1 here, for instance. And then next TD tag I put Smith, and then the next TD tag I put the number. And if I save, you can see it displays here. Now this is very, very ugly, but this can be easily fixed with CSS, so don't worry. So let's create another table row. And then in here I'll have another TD, that'll be 1. And then I'll have another TD which will be Smith, and another TD which will be another weird phone number. So I'll just come up with a weird one. And then, yeah, sorry, this should be Tom, this should have been 2. Exactly. Now let me teach you a Visual Studio Code shortcut. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can go ahead and highlight this TR, and then press Control Shift and then down. Now this will create another table row for you. So let's do 3, and then this can be used on any line of code. And then we'll do David as this, and then we'll just do 999. Now this looks pretty ugly, but don't worry, CSS can easily fix that. Now, let's move on to something that I think many people should be excited about, and that is buttons. Now, apparently, sorry, but there's only one type of button that you can create, and that will be with the button tag. And then we'll call this, we'll say the button is clicked. Now, it's going to create our HR here that I discussed earlier about. Now, just like everything else, buttons can take attributes too. So we'll do another button, and then let's take an attribute of disabled, and then let's say disabled as our name. Now you can see I cannot no longer click on that. Now let's create another button, and we can do it. We can give it an attribute of reset, and then reset. All the way. Oh, that's enough. Alright, let's move on to the next type of stuff. Now, I'm gonna start speeding up a bit because I think you guys got the drill of HTML. And then, if you want to look into this more on future or want to review or something, there's a really helpful website, so let me just show you guys. You can go ahead and visit w3schools.com, and then they have an HTML reference list. So everything I have talked about can probably be found in here. If not, then I mean I probably taught something wrong. But most likely it should be found in here. If you want to review, it can be easily found in here. So let's just move on to forms, and then we'll go ahead and then we'll have to start. We'll just move on. So let me find my notes. All right. So for form, a form starts with a form tag. So one new thing, but as soon as I press tab on Visual Studio Code, it gives me this action attribute. Now, by default, it's not like, so if you have created a website with Weebly, Wix, you would have never had to dealt with this. So like you could just create a form, and then it will be submit whenever someone comes, they can submit it, and you won't have to even care about it apparently. But now in HTML, it's all about your own database. So right now we cannot submit this form anywhere, but I'll show you a really cool way you could submit this form. But it won't submit. Instead we'll just create like our own search box sort of thing for Google search box. So you'll see later in the tutorial. So in here usually people will put like form.php or something, but since we have none of that, we can go and get rid of that. We won't have to even care about that. So inside of these form tags, now inside of a form you might see a label, but let's go and create our HR here before doing that. So inside we can go and put a label. Now our label has an automatic attribute as well. This is a for attribute. Now the for attribute is basically the name of it. So I want to create a field for first name, but if I save, nothing shows because the for attribute is not displayed to the user. Instead, between these tags is whatever displayed to the user. So inside a label, first name. Now you do not need this if you do not want it, and then it'll still look the same, but hey, depends. Now let's go and create our input. Now you will see an attribute is known as text, a type which is text. So now there's different types of types in HTML. Let me go and show you. So we just got a form. Here's our input. Now you can input almost anything, almost anything. So now you will see this is on the same line, but how do we learn to like break our lines or some sort? Well, we learned with the BR tag, which is line break. Now this is still touching, which I do not like. Another line break. This still looks ugly, but I create forms with CSS, so it's no big deal why. So now let's talk about, now there's more types. So one of the types of input, there's an email type, which is amazing. Now let me go and talk about the shortcut I just did. So I did input and then colon, and then you have all these types. Seriously, you can just play all around. But now I can type in the type I want. So let's do email type and then press tab. It gives these two extra. So we learned about one attribute, which is the ID attribute, and then the second attribute is the name attribute. So basically you're just giving this field a name, like you just gave yourself a name when you were born. Now you're giving this thing a name, which you don't have to even worry about. And then it creates an email field. But let's go and create a label so we know what we're talking about. So email. Now this looks ugly. Break. And then we need another break here. And then we need another break here to situate that issue. There we go. Now by default this comes with some validation, so I can just do joe@gmail.com. This will let me through. But if I were to do like Joe, if I press enter, yeah, we're gonna have to need a submit button, so don't worry. Wait, let me make sure that I'm not screwing up. Alright, yeah, we're gonna get a submit button soon. Now let's go and talk about the submit button, like, because we need one right now, apparently. So it's an input type. So we do input colon submit for this is shortcut. Now by the way, these shortcuts are because we're using Emmet, which is pre-installed in Visual Studio Code, so no need to worry. Now this value attribute is a new one. So if I were to just save, we have a blank button, but the value is what's displayed to the user. So we'll say submit. There. Now it's going to add another line break to make it look good. So now if I were to just say Joe and then click submit, it gives me this amazing alerts like pre-color everything. So you know, you might want to use an email attribute the next time you do it. Now there's one type of attribute I think you're going to love, and that is you just have to put this here, and this is the required attribute. So if I were to submit this form without it, which apparently it did, but let's just have to put like A, and then click submit. Apparently that didn't work. Oh wait, we put this required on the submit button, so obviously you click on the submit button. Why did I even do that? So now if I were to submit, please fill this field out. This is a required field. Now if I were to say A, it's like there's no @ sign. You can't. So I can do @ and then it's still bugging me saying that's not complete. So I can do gmail.com and it'll probably let me submit. Yep, probably submit. And it did. But apparently it did not go anywhere because we have nothing defined. So now we can sit here all day defining attributes and all. But if same website again, now in here they talk about forms. So if I were to just go ahead and show you, so this is under the HTML tab, and then we went to HTML forms or input attributes. Yeah, exactly. So we just go into forms. We have like hundreds of different. So I will talk about not any more of these forms, but You can get them all from here, like copy and paste, learn. It's pretty simple stuff. And then you have input attributes, which I talked about one right now. And that would be, so you have a disabled attribute, you have size, max length, and then you have like autocomplete, you have min, max, disabled, amazing stuff. We just talked about the required. And then let me talk about one more attribute, which is the placeholder. So let's just say you wanted your customer to enter this data in some sort of format. So we use placeholder and we'll say enter first name, and then we'll like have like XXX to show it, and then like they can enter. So that was amazing. But before this even existed in HTML, you had to do this through JavaScript. And then now there is one type of attribute, which is the value attribute. We'll say enter first name, but you will find this immediately. This is basically plain text. This is not anything. So when you click on it, you'll still have it. That's why placeholder is a valuable resource, because it works. It just works. So let's quickly do a select list, so I'm not leaving you hanging anywhere. So a form select list, I will quickly speed through this. So we have a select, and then you have all these extra attributes, which once again, they're now required by default. We do option, and then let me teach you emit abbreviation shortcut. So if I were to do option, and then I want to create 3 options, I just do the asterisk sign, and then 3. If I click that, we get 3 options, but they do nothing apparently. So I just have to do option 1, option 2, and then option 3. And then here's our select list. But let's just say, but sometimes on websites, you're not allowed to click on the first one, and then there's like a weird new type. So we can actually have an option, and then we can add an attribute of disabled, and then we'll say select, like we're gonna do like dash select to make it look professional. But you will soon to realize it's only visible here, not anywhere else. So we can add another attribute, which is the selected attribute. Save, and then this is pre-selected, so this option will be pre-selected, and then your user cannot click on this. They have to choose one of these. Alright, now this does look weird since the submit button is, this is after the submit, so I can just copy the submit button and then move it down here. Alright, so now let's talk about text areas, which are for messages basically. So we can add a label for message and say message, and then yeah, we're gonna need line breaks apparently, because CSS is not available at the moment. So if I were to do a line break there, so inside of here, let's do a text area. Now text areas are not self-closing. Now you can get rid of all these attributes, you won't have to care about them, and then you have to put nothing but put a line break. And then here, this is extendable, and you can say this is a message. It has this weird font, which can also be fixed with CSS. So no big issue right now. We'll get into CSS later. Now, let's go ahead and, yeah, there's a lot of, so there's a lot of, what's called input types that you don't have to worry about. Now let's talk about images. So we do, if we talk about, so we can create an image tag with img tab. Now, now this is a new attribute, just like our href attribute. This is a source attribute. So inside of here, we put our image. So we can just go to Google and say image literally, go to our images, and just find a good image. So I like, let's just say we like that image. I can just click on copy image or address and paste it in here. And if I save, we will hopefully see it. But this, number 1, this image is way too big. Number 2, let's talk about this attribute, the alternate text attribute. So if I were to say image of night sky, let's just say, even though it's probably not. And if I save, you will see nothing yet. But let's just say there was an issue loading the image. Let's just say I had a mistake and I made a stupid mistake. well, we will have this text instead, so you can still get the message out to your user in some way. Alright, now let's go ahead and, so let me go and say images, and let's go and do a break tag to actually space it out. Alright, so now let's go and do our creating a nav bar. Now I think you're going to be pretty excited by learning about nav bar. So basically a nav bar has a HTML tag of nav. If I do nav, inside of here is an unordered list. Now we're going to create links. So we use the A tag inside the li, and then in here we can specify where we want to go. So index.html is going to be our home. So now here is where you put it. Home. So we just click on home. We're back to our home page. Now let's create a new page. Now to create a new page of an HTML document, you go here, a new file inside the same directory, the same folder, about.html. Now let me teach you a VS Code shortcut, or image shortcut in other words. If you do Shift 1 or exclamation point basically, now you will see image abbreviation. Just click on, just do tab, and you get a predefined template ready to go. So I can go in and say this is my about page, and I'm ready to rock and roll. I say about, so we can just say about page. Now let's head back to index.html, and let's create another navbar item, and we'll call it about.html, and then I do about. We have an about. Now if I click on about, we're at our about page. Yay! So we have just created our about page. So this is really cool. Now I want to go ahead and get to talk about basically like section structuring and everything. So if I was to go back to this website, and I want to show you guys something. So if I go back to the home page and I do like learn, there will be an image here, or it used to be there. I hope still there. It's probably, yeah. So exactly, so it gives you, this thing gives you a lot of information. Like, you don't even need my help, you could just have read this. But you know, it's great to watch a video and learn. You can do it anywhere almost. So the formatting, where would I be? Exactly, it's somewhere definitely. But let's just look it up on Google. So we'll do HTML page structure. Probably somewhere. Something like this. If I can. There we go. This is what I'm looking for. So if I were to just open this in a new tab, so you can just do open image in new tab. So I can zoom in now. So you'll see, this is how you like basically create a web page. You have your header on top, nav, and then section, article, footer, aside. So now, I do not use the article tag. I use, so basically I create this whole area as a section. This is my whole area, is my nav bar, this is my aside, and this is my footer. So to give you an idea of what I mean, none of this will be structured this way until you use CSS. So I can go and structure it header. Now inside this header, I like having my nav bar. So I just do nav. Now inside of my nav bar, so you can see, they use the exact same tag, nav. Then inside nav bar, we're going to create our nav bar just as I've taught you guys. And we'll do index.html, and then this will be our home page. And then let's do about.html. That will be my about page. Now if I was to look back here in the sandbox, and let's go into about, be this. I can click on home, and we're here. Yay! And then outside of my nav and outside of my header, now let's have a title quickly. So inside the header, let's put an H1 for inside a header, obviously. I'm going to say my about page. And then if I was to go to about, it is there. Now, it's outside my header. Let's create a section. Inside the section, we might want a paragraph that says this is an about page section. And then we have another paragraph for like lorem 20, lorem 30, something like that. And then outside the section, let's put it aside. So this will be like your sidebar, but it won't look like a sidebar. So if you were creating like a blog or something, you might like have links to external categories or talking about something. So you might want to li, and then you'll see like item 1 as your sidebar, or be like item 2 there. So this is like your aside, even though it doesn't even look like it. Now footer, there's something really cool about the footer that I want you to know. So I can do copyright. So this is inside a paragraph tag. Now if you do, now we want to create that C with the circles with the copyright symbol. You can do ampersand, copy, semicolon, and then we do 2019, and we get that symbol. So you know, a little trick, and then we can do all rights reserved. Not maybe the best web page, but hey, it's pretty good. All right, so far we can create a website. I mean, not the best looking, but hey, it's a website, so why do you care? So now let's move on to the CSS. So the thing I have been bragging about all along, and you'll see why I've been bragging about it. So we could apply CSS directly to this file, but I want to keep this like as separate notes for you guys. So go ahead and close this folder in your text editor, and you can go and close out of your text editor. And then now you can keep your browser open, but just going to close the tab because that live server is off. And then everything I talk about it can be found in that W3 schools thing. So let's just go back to our folder structure, and then we're gonna move on to basically where you stored that project, which was right on my desktop, HTML sandbox. And let's move. Now let's gonna create a new folder. So outside of HTML sandbox, so we're in here. We're gonna do new, and then folder. We're gonna call this CSS_sandbox. And then here, just gonna open this with your code editor. So create a new file. So now we're gonna start with our HTML, because you need an index.html file to you know, what's it called? Like link your CSS to, because you cannot create a website without the index.html file. So now let's create a style.css file. But before you do that, create a new folder for your CSS. Stay organized. One word, stay organized. Inside of that folder, you can go and create your style.css. Alright, so now let's move back to index.html. We can use that shortcut I've taught you. And then let's go to name this our CSS sandbox. Now we can immediately press open with live server. Now this will open. Now if you in your default browser, but I will go and open it up on here. So now inside of here, I want to create a header, and now let's create a div, and we'll give it a class of header. By the way, you can give this also a class of main header, or an ID also of main header, so you can have like so we're gonna say like header main. So you can have like multiple classes and IDs between. And now if we want to create one more class, let's just say not just only main header, you can say like title. You can do that too. That'll be two classes inside one. So inside this header, I want to create an H1 that says my website. Alright, so once again, very ugly looking. So I'm going to reset the size so it'll be easier. Now, we gave this thing a class of header, but before we do that, you can actually target these elements. So let me teach you one way of doing CSS, and that is with the style attribute. So adding a style. Now let's just say I want to make this the color of it, so font color, so that'll be color red. If I save, CSS applied. Alright? Very lucky. Now we could even do, let's just say, font size and make that 20 pixels. There. But that's not a big difference. 100 pixels. There. That should be a lot better to read. Alright? But that looks very ugly. So now you can do all of that. The second way of applying CSS is, so basically our main goal is to keep your CSS separate from your HTML. So if I were to create a style tag, enter twice. Now, learn this new syntax. So let's just say I want to target this header. So just the element header. So I would use header, curly braces, and enter, so we can get this nice format. Inside of here, you can have multiple CSS styles per attribute. So you will see I targeted the element header here. But if I want to target the class of header, I put a dot for class. Let's just say I want to target the ID of header, which it doesn't exist right now, but you could add it. Hashtag for ID. Alright, so really easy. Right now we're just targeting regular header. And then we want the color of it to be green. Alright, that doesn't look really good, but red. So, you get the point. Now, the third way to apply CSS, which is the most recommended, is your external. But how do we link this file inside of here? Because if I were to go ahead and do header, and if I did color to be red, nothing's done. Like, nothing's happening here. And that is because we haven't linked it. So if I do a link tag, now I can say start. I can now be able to go to this folder. So it's inside the CSS folder. So if I were to do CSS style.css, if I press save, we have our color. Alright, so now we learned about one attribute, which is color. Now I'm going to get rid of this. Now the first thing I want to do is get rid of something. I want to get rid of this default margin that it has in padding, whatever it has. So to get rid of something default, so like basically the root, so like the root of your root is just asterisk, curly braces, and now you can set margin : 0. So no more margin. Now it's going to get rid of padding, which I'll explain later. So now to explain padding quickly, let's going to create a div with the ID. So let's use ID. Let's practice our ID skills and call it box. And more specifically, box 1. So now, box 1, it doesn't display yet because we had to create box 1 because it's empty. So there's an attribute of, now it's going to do a background color attribute, which will make it red. Now it still doesn't display because there's nothing in here. So if I was to put an H, let's just I was to put hello, it would display with the background of red. But that's not very helpful. But I'm trying to display how padding works. So inside I'm just going to say, I'm going to put box basically. Alright, so you see this element. So it has box, right? Now, it has a background color of red. So with margin, if I was to use margin, watch what happens. So I can do margin top, and let's do 10 pixels. We move from the top. So this thing moved away from the top. If I was to do 30 pixels, it moved even further away from the top. If I was to do margin bottom, which you would not see, let's do margin left. This thing moved left away. But let's just say I want to keep this red color consistent, right? Like I do not want to move the red color, but I want to move the element inside. So I can do padding top. That'll be, let's just do 10 pixels. We have this color. I can do padding bottom. That is, we have that color too. I can do padding left, 10 pixels. We have that too. I can do padding right, which you won't see at a moment, but 10 pixels. Now, you can see that all this is the same 10 pixels. So there's an easier way to write this. So you could have done padding basically, and said 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels for all four. But we can even shorten this even more. 10 pixels. And then if I were to comment this, so basically comment this is the same shortcut, so control and forward slash. But this is how comments look like. So there's forward slash asterisk, asterisk forward slash. So if I were to comment that out, it's the same. To prove it to those of you who don't believe comments, do anything, get rid of that. Same padding. So I can do 20 pixels. Same thing. So this is pretty consistent. So that was padding and margin. So I can get rid of that. Now I want to create a nice looking header. So if I can go, now the font. Let me mention about font. This font is very ugly, Times New Roman. I do not like it. I'll be surprised if you like it. So let's target our body. Alright? This is like the main. So I want the font of the whole entire web page to be the same. If I can do body, and let's do font family. Now by default, Visual Studio Code gives you all these options of fonts. And now let's go and choose sans serif. This is much better in my vision. So this looks a lot better. Now let's go and give this a background color. Oh, let's just give it. So now it's not all about colors. So it's not like that. By the way, yeah, sorry. So to give this my website a background color, but we just learned something. You can give body a background color, and the whole web page will be that color. So if I was to get rid of that, and let's target our header. But more specifically, I want to target a class of header. So we learned, here's one rule. Use classes and IDs more than the actual element. It'll make your life a lot easier. So, dot header. So inside of this header, we'll go ahead and say, well, I want social save to get rid of that. Let's do a background color of hashtag CCC. Or 333, sorry. Alright. Now you can get all these hex. These are called hex colors. So you can do hex color. And then like pick your own color. So Google has a pretty good format for choosing colors. So like this is your hexadecimal value that you would use. Alright. So let's move back to our web page. And then now here's one thing you realize. That you're realizing. There's not much space, the font isn't the right color, everything. So if you recall from the first example, we can change the color of elements. So font color, white. Now still this looks kind of ugly. So let's do padding because we want the background color to be extended. Let's do 10 pixels. Padding, so all around. Not too bad. Let's do 20 pixels. Even better. So this looks a lot better than this. This is a lot better. Now let's do something more better. So red looks a lot vibrant. Now let's add some content to play around with. So I want to style a list, or more specifically, let's style buttons. So something that's very exciting to style will be a button. And let's just say button. Now first thing, we do not want it inside the header. We want to create a section. So section. There. And then we can fix this by Shift Tab. Now first thing you'll realize, when I'm zoomed in only 100%, so normal, the button is really small, it has no margin, so we might want to use margin on the button. So let's go and target a button, because buttons are like general, so you don't specifically want, like you'll want a button to be like the same everywhere. Like you want your one area have a button that's like huge and another one to be small. You want them like all similar. So for this button, let's give it some margin, by the way. And I want to give it some margin top of 10 pixels. Alright, margin left at 10 pixels. Now, to increase like the size of this button, you have two ways. You can use height and the width property. So we can do height of this to be like 20 pixels and then the width to be 20 pixels. But that's really small. So let's do 100 pixels. And then this to be 100. But that's pretty big, so let's do 60 pixels. Alright, this is pretty okay. Let's do 25. and then this to be 75. Now you can see I can play around with this button all day, but we have a better way to do this. We can just do padding basically, and then for top and bottom, so let's save, let me show you, yeah. So let's do top and bottom padding to be, let's do 30 pixels top and bottom padding, and then 40 pixels left and right. Alright, that's kind of big. Exactly, so you're going to split these in half since they're not what you think they'll be. It's still big. But you're accumulating basically. Alright, this is a good size button. Now, if I were to zoom in, this button has a weird border. So we can get rid of that border, or we can create a new border with the border property, and then let's just say none, no border. Alright, we got rid of that border. Yay. Now let's go ahead and to do a nice background color. I did not like this background color. Let's do hashtag CCC. Alright, let's do 333. And let's give it a color attribute of white. So the text inside is white. And then looks a lot better than used to. But in 100% it actually looks a lot better. Let's give it a radius, border radius. Like make it circular. So we can do border radius. And then it's dependent on pixels. So let's do 5 pixels border radius. And you can already see this button is kind of rounded. Looks a lot better. Let's do 10 pixels. We can even do 30 pixels. That'll look even better. We can even do 50 pixels. Now you can even do percentages. So I can do like 50%, which will make it like a weird circle. You can do 100%, which is the same, but you can actually do 25%. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, weird stuff. But I think 25 pixels looks pretty good. But 5 pixels looks better feeling like a box button. थोड़ा low volume करो. Alright, so our border radius is 5 pixels. So this looks pretty nice, but here's one thing you might be realizing. There's no like cursor clicks. Like if you were to click on, like you don't necessarily need a cursor click since most of Chrome doesn't do it. But like if you were on a website and you want to click on something, your cursor turns like that. Well, that's why you have a property of pointer, cursor, and then we can say pointer. So I want a cursor to be pointer when you on it. So whenever on this button, we have a cursor. Yay. Now, so you will see that most buttons, like anything that you almost hover on, hover is the new ones, like when you put your mouse over, has a different color or like a different style to it. So to access this inner styling, we do button : hover. So almost anything can have a hover state. So with this, let's change the background color to be transparent. So, but then we lose the text. So we want to change it to black. Alright, still good, but that doesn't look very beautiful. Now let's add a border of, let's do a 1 pixel border. So we want it solid, and then we want it black. Alright, let's do that. Alright, not bad, but you'll see it's kind of moving. And to show you that it's actually moving, we'll do paragraph of lorem 10. Let me show you. Alright, so watch what happens to the paragraph. The paragraph moves. And that is because there's no border defined previously. So it adds an extra 1 pixel to it, which moves everything by 1 pixel. So for that reason, you can have a 1 pixel. So you want to have a 1 pixel border that's just solid as well and transparent. So no color. And then now it looks a lot better. Now this is also very fast moving. So you can have a transition property. Now don't worry, if you do not understand everything, all this can be found in the W3 schools. So now, watch what happens. It smoothly fades in. So, it kind of had that animation too. So basically we had just done an animation. Amazing. So you have that as well, which I mean looks amazing. Like stare at this all day. So we have the style of button. Now you can actually get like the basic purpose of CSS so far. Now we can actually, so I want to go ahead and style forms. So forms are very ugly by default, and you can see this text actually looks pretty good. If I show you, this text actually looks pretty good. So let's go and style a form. So form. So once again we have the action, which we don't need. Now let's do label for first name. So let's recreate that form we were trying to create before. And this time we're not have no line breaks, none of that. So input text, and then let's have a placeholder too. We'll say enter first name. And then let's do label again. So for last name, we'll do last name. And then we'll be like input type text. And then we'll have like another placeholder for enter last name. And then have another label for email. And then we'll say email address. And then let's do input type of email. And let's have a placeholder of enter email address. Let's go ahead. Alright, so I did not apply any styling on this. And let's have an input for submit. Input submit with the value of submit. And then let's give it a class. So now let me go to move back. So let's, like I say, classes are general. What if we give this a class with dot? So we make this element styling into a dot. So a class basically, just for class, so this button changes back. But what if we give this a class of button? And you will see our submit button gets a default thing. Now it's going to make our button, so we want to make a display. So we want it to be a block line element, alright? So block, so this is on its own line automatically, right? Now it's going to play with our form that we just created. So we do form. And let's start. So now I want to give this a margin all around of 10 pixels. So this is moved around, but I want a margin top to be even more. So let's make it 20 pixels margin top. Alright, now let's do nothing else here. Let's move on to our inputs. So you're gonna like nest elements, just like in HTML, you're nesting elements here. Now, this is an input. We do not want to play with this. So we can do brackets and let's give it a type. So I wanted the type to be only the inputs that are text. And then we can do a comma for another one. And we'll say input that. And we'll say type equals for email. And then now we can do curly braces. So we can actually target 2, 3 elements all at the same time. For the same styling, just because of that. Alright? So before we move on to this, let's target our labels and make them a display a block. And then let's make them have an all-around margin of 10 pixels, but only on the top and bottom, not on the left or right. Alright? Let's give this 5 pixels instead. Alright. So let's give these forms inside a padding of all around of not all around. So on top and bottom, I want 20 pixels, and then left and right, let's just do, yeah, exactly. So 20 pixels tops and bottom, but nothing on the left and right. Alright, that looks pretty ugly. 10. I think 8 will look amazing. Or 7. There we go. 7 looks a lot better. Alright, don't worry. We'll give it a margin to move it around. So we'll give the margin of 10 pixels. And then 0 on left and right. Alright. Let's actually give this a margin of 3 pixels. Exactly. That looks a lot better. So now let's give it a width. So this is a new attribute. So we talked about this. But width. Let's give it 100% width. So the whole entire page. Basically. Now this looks okay. So we actually just created a really good form. So test, nano, whatever. Now let's give it a border radius. So let's make it look even better. Let's give it a border radius of 5 pixels. Now you will see this ugly stuff. So we just got a very ugly looking form. But I can actually do border. And let's fix that. So we do 1 pixel border, which is going to be solid. It'll make it #CCC. Alright. So Pretty good so far. But let's give it margin. So let's give it padding on the left and right of 1 pixel. 1 pixel. Alright. So that looks a lot better. So far here's our form. So this looks a lot better. So we do like nano and then productions and then like nano productions. Add to gmail.com. Wait, what is our email address? Yeah, I'll figure that out, but yeah. So basically, we just styled our form. So this may look a lot better if I kind of zoom in. So like if you were to zoom out a bit. So this looks a lot better, trust me. Like, this looks a whole lot better than the previous form, if you have seen. Alright, so this is we talked about a lot of attributes so far. Now let's go ahead and table styling. Now we can actually create a quick table. Alright, so I do not want to waste much time, but let's do a table. Inside this table, let's just go ahead and do a t-head, tr, th, we'll do like first name, th, we'll do like last name, and then t body, we'll have like tr, td, we'll have like Tom, and then td will be Smith, then another table row, like td will be like John, and then another td will be like roll, whatever. Alright, so we have this form. Now, first of all, the font looks a lot better, so this looks pretty good. I don't know what to say, but alright. So we'll do table. Let's make this width of 100%. So like, alright, there we go. We got a lot more spacing. Now let's give this a border of 1 pixel solid, and let's do like hashtag 333. Alright, pretty good. But I want to give this a margin. So let's give it... Actually, let me teach you something real cool. So if I were to do margin of if I said width of 90%, and if we did margin auto, it's already center. So basically we have centered this in one way or the other. And then let's target our tables TRs, and let's see if they can get a border of 1 pixel solid hashtag 333. Alright. So we can do TDs and TH. There we go. So we just got a border for our elements, but we can actually fix this issue by just giving them a background color. Background color, let's just say hashtag F4, F4, F4. Alright, there we go. This looks a lot better table, and yeah, we just got a really handy table. Or let's just have now we can actually play around. So if we look back, our header is TH. So if we do table TH elements, we can just say we want a border bottom on them of 1 pixel solid. Hashtag CSS. Or 333. Exactly, so that will look hashtag 333. So this will look pretty good too, still. Not bad if I do say so myself. At all. Very nice looking. So let's move. So this is basically not everything of CSS, obviously. If I was to check W3 schools, there is like a bucket load of more stuff to cover. Trust me. But this is enough to get you started on like you can just read this for a bit, and then like the attributes we have talked about can actually help you with everything else. So like we have basically just like created like a short cheat sheet of like the basics, like introduction to these new attributes that you have never ever heard about. But this is amazing so far. Now in this video we will not cover of creating a website, so apologize, but check out a video sooner on my channel which we will learn on which you can create. We will like create a website using everything that we have learned. Alright, so check out Nano Productions for that type of video, and then I'll see you